Now, we're taking a look at the fintech ecosystem, which has undoubtedly been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
But pre-pandemic, fintech was evolving at a rapid rate, which could arguably have protected it against an even greater impact. And to try and put some sense of perspective on this, we're joined from Paris by Laurent Nizri, who is the CEO and founder of the Paris Fintech Forum, which is a major annual international event on digital finance and fintech.
Laurent, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us. Now, you've been running the successful Fintech Forum now for 5 years. So in that time, what are the key evolutions or phases that you've noticed?
First of all, thank you very much for having me tonight with you. I mean, in this difficult time, it's a real pleasure and honor to be with you tonight. And congrats for making this show happen. To answer quite quickly your question, the key point we've seen in 5 years, let's say that when we built the event in 2015, we built it on a motto which was competition, meaning a non-naive competition and many times cooperation between incumbents and new players. What we've seen over the 5 years was our dream becoming a reality. At the beginning, let's say it was very hard to see banks ready to work with those new players. And let's say the new players were a bit dreaming about difficult facility to do that. You know that it's difficult. It takes a long time. It's an industry. You don't change an industry in a few days. But what we've seen years after years is both ecosystem become mature and working together more and more year after year. So that led, for example, to many fintechs who were launching at the beginning as a B2C player pivoting because they saw the difficulty of trying to raise awareness and have a big customer base and have revenues on a B2C model. So beside a few big names you all know in the neobank industry, many of the, let's say, new players of 2014, 15 have now shift to B2B business and work with financial industries. That's one of the points. Another thing we've seen, of course, is that the equation was not so simple. So interestingly, you have had some buyouts by big banks over fintechs and so on, and some of them led to, let's say, longer than expected business plan, but they are still working on it. And I think if we are patient and if we are not led only by the Twitter time, which led us to think that everything should be done in 30 seconds, we could see good results in the coming year. That's another point. Another subject that we have seen, of course, if we want to see by vertical, was, for example, besides some big noise about neobanks rising with the big names, and many of them coming, by the way, from UK. But what we've seen also is that big maturity period for payment. Remember that it's an old story. PayPal was, the century before. For my kids, it's like dinosaurs time. So, and today, payment industry with new players is quite a mature industry. This new player can't be called anymore fintech. They are really, some of them really big players working with other key actors to try to transform the industry. And of course, PSD2, which was at the early beginning in 2013 with a green book, is now a reality and led to a lot of transformations. Another thing we've seen in the past was a big difficulty for some verticals because, of course, fintech is not one industry. You have plenty of things. You have payment, but you have also insurtech, wealth management, lending, and so on. And that was very different countries from another countries. For example, lending, big thing in US, quite a big thing too in UK, small thing in plenty of place of Europe for plenty of reasons we don't have time to deep in right now. Another subject would be insurtech and wealth management. Great subject, plenty of things to do. Everybody says it's the future. You didn't see a big rise. Of course, you have 2 or 3 names you can put right now on screen, but not 25 compared to other fintech verticals. There are also plenty of reasons for that. We can come back on that point another time. And of course, we have to mention up and downs of ICOs, and we could mention also the up and downs of blockchain crypto concepts. And today we see a kind of maturity for some of those concepts around, for example, decentralized finance. So I think we won't have time to go in all the detail, but what we saw I was lucky enough to run the Paris Fintech Forum 2020. We were the only event in the world running physically this year on that kind of event on fintech and digital finance. And what I was saying on stage end of January was that we were going in the second phase of that so-called fintech revolution. It was more the fin and tech phase, where the transformation will go at the deep of the finance industry, like the core banking level. The platform becomes a reality for many of those actors, being on the regulation side, but also on the technical side. And of course, and I think we can perhaps go on that later, but the COVID has pushed some of this point even further.
Speaking of which, Laurent, it's very difficult for us to ignore the times in which we find ourselves in. It's more than 6 months after the first lockdowns in Europe. But what for you are the impacts of the crisis on the global fintech ecosystems?
The first one is not only for fintech, it's for everybody. I love seeing you on stage on this TV screen, my friend, but honestly, hard is life for all of us, and especially doing business. So let's make it simple. If you were in the business circle before COVID, still a bit okay for you. If you were not already at the good level in this business circle, life is hard. You cannot really initiate new business only with a video chat. Of course, if you know already each other, that's another question. So it's tough for all the tech industry in general. But if you come back to fintech, what we see is very different kind of input. First of it, people say difficult to raise money, not for everybody. In fact, you have a lot of money in the market. You have absolutely no way to earn money without any risk. So taking risk, less input, let's invest in private equity and VCs and so on. So you have a lot of money and you don't have so many new kids who can arrive with a new project. So in fact, the money is going in the existing pockets. In the fintech, we have already a bit of track records who proved they can do something. And sometimes the rounds are even bigger than what we thought they could be. You can read the news recently. You have quite big rounds, in fact. But for names, you knew already before the crisis, not for new names. Another thing we've seen, of course, is on some vertical. Digital payment, bigger than ever. E-commerce, rising. So you need even more than before this kind of payment. Contactless payment, I mean, I'm sure you discussed of that many times over the day, but it's huge too. And the rise, we've done in 6 months more progress than in 6 years in terms of volume of deployment. I can't name the scheme, but I remember a scheme telling me we will need 3 years to deploy to double the sale of the NFC payment. And suddenly we did it in 3 months. So, when you want, you can. And also we have in wealth management, I just mentioned it was tough for wealth management industry for 5 or 6 years. Perhaps it's the time because we never had so much money in the pocket of the European. Of course, not everybody, don't take my word badly, but we had a lot of money on the market. And people use this time to do a lot of arbitrage on their wallets and so on. So you have a lot of players in this market of wealth industry who could become quite big in the coming months because there is time and money. And you can do that from in front of your computer, not having a social life. Lending is not so easy because the state is lending the money. The state is giving helicopter money to everybody. So, of course, if you are part of the scheme to distribute that money, you are part of the game. But the risk will rise later on, and you have seen already some consolidation in the lending market. I can't comment all of them, but you could see that the valuation are not as big as what people were saying before this COVID crisis. And of course, you could also go to neobank. In B2C, you have a flight over quality for VCs. You have seen already some raise, which were different. And again, quite a polarization about the key big actor. And we could fly over many other subjects, but I see time is flying and I see your eyes over the screen.
Okay. That's a challenging landscape that you described there. But Laurent Nizri, thank you so much there for your time. That was Laurent Nizri, who is the CEO and founder of the Paris Fintech Forum.